essence, he was being told by Hitler, you're not a player in this world political game. We don't count you for very much.
They stood under the gallows, quiet but shaking. Some begged, some smiled. One shouted, "Heil Hitler," before the rope tightened. A huge crowd stood nearby, watching. Not for peace, not for justice, just to see them fall. Wanda Klaff, Arthur Nebe, Rudolf Höss. Once people feared these names, now they waited for death. But even after their bodies dropped, the shadow of Hitler was still there. These hangings were not the end. They were a warning, a final chapter in a very dark story. Let's step into the last moments of the people who killed for him and paid the price. The invasion that began it all. It started with a lie. On September 1st, 1939, Adolf Hitler told the world that Polish soldiers had attacked a German radio station near the border. The story wasn't true, but it gave him the excuse he wanted. Within hours, German forces stormed into Poland. Tanks rolled across fields. Bombs fell on cities. And behind them came something worse, the SS. Just over 2 weeks later, the Soviet Union invaded from the east. It was part of a secret deal between Hitler and Stalin. Poland never stood a chance. On September 28th, Warsaw surrendered. The country was split in two like a broken bone. But this was never just about land. For the Nazis, Poland was full of people they called unworthy. Jewish families, priests, teachers, children. Whole villages disappeared. Nearly 2 million Polish Jews were locked away in ghettos. The rest would be taken to camps. Some were shot on sight. Others were used for labor until they died. And some were sent to places built only for one purpose: death. It was in this silence after the bombs that the real terror began. Lists were drawn up, names circled in ink, trains were prepared. This was not a war, it was a plan. And in one quiet part of northern Poland, close to the city of Danzig, a camp was built. Not the biggest, not the most famous, but inside its wooden fences, horror lived. And among those who made it run was a woman named Wanda. We'll go there next. Danzig and the seeds of hatred. Danzig was a city caught between two flags. After World War I, it wasn't fully German anymore. The Treaty of Versailles had placed it under the League of Nations. A free city, they called it. But most of the people living there still spoke German. Many still dreamed of the old empire. When Hitler rose to power, Danzig listened. The local Nazi party grew quickly. By 1933, they were in control. The city became a test ground, not for weapons, but for something worse. Poles were treated like strangers in their streets. Polish schools were closed. Their language was banned from buses, markets, and even parks. Children were forced to attend German schools. Teachers were fired. Workers were replaced. And then came the Jews. By 1938, Danzig's small Jewish community was already shrinking. Laws stripped them of rights. Synagogues were vandalized. Families fled. A year later, only a few hundred Jews remained. Most were gone. The rest were about to be. This was no longer a city. It was a warning sign. When the war began, Danzig welcomed it. Nazi flags flew from rooftops. And just beyond the city, on the edge of the woods and swamps, a new place was built. With fences, with barracks, with guards. It had a name: Stutthof. And while most people have heard of Auschwitz or Dachau, few remember Stutthof. But its silence held the same darkness. And within its gates, evil found a face, not in a man, but in a young woman with cold hands and no mercy. The shadow of Stutthof. Stutthof began with 8 wooden barracks and a wire fence. At first, it was called a civilian camp, a place to hold people who didn't fit the Nazi plan. But the truth was clear from the start. This was a place built to break people. The prisoners were mostly Poles, priests, writers, teachers, anyone who could think or speak freely. They were arrested before the war even began. Their names had already been written down. Soon the camp began to grow. New buildings went up, watchtowers, a crematorium, a gas chamber, and more fences. In 1942, the SS took full control. From that moment on, Stutthof became a true concentration camp, one of the many pieces in what the Nazis called the final solution. By 1943, it was no longer just a prison. It was a factory of death. Men and women worked until their bodies gave out. Starvation and disease did the rest.
I met two Jewish women who survived this camp.
When winter came, typhus swept through the barracks like a cold fire. Those too sick to work were killed, some with gum, some with injections, some simply left to die. Later, Jews were brought in, many from Auschwitz, over 23,000 in total. Most never left, and among the guards were German men and women. One of them was young, just 22 when she arrived. She had worked in a jam factory. She wore boots, she gave orders. She beat prisoners until they couldn't stand. Some she killed with her own hands. Her name was Wanda Klaff, and what she did in that camp would not be forgotten, not by those who survived, and not by the country that would one day watch her hang. Wanda Klaff, the woman who killed with her hands. Wanda Klaff was not born a monster. She came from Danzig, a girl raised in the same streets where Polish children were pushed aside and Jewish shop windows were smashed. She finished school in 1938 and worked in a jam factory. She got married, became a housewife, and then the war changed everything. In 1944, she joined the SS as a camp guard, first at a sub-camp, then at Stutthof. There, something in her unraveled. Or maybe it was always there, just waiting. Prisoners feared her more than most. She hit people for no reason, with fists, with clubs, with her boots. Survivors said she would beat them until they stopped moving. Sometimes she laughed. Sometimes she didn't say anything at all. One woman said Wanda once pushed someone face first into a mud pit and held them there until they stopped fighting. When she was later arrested and put on trial, she didn't cry. She didn't deny it. I beat at least 2 prisoners every day, she said, as if it were a job she did well. And in her way, it was. The SS wanted guards who didn't flinch, who didn't hesitate. Wanda didn't. She followed orders. And when she was angry, she went even further. She was only 24 when the war ended. She tried to disappear. She went back to her parents' home. But the fever came first, typhoid. She was weak when they found her, but not too weak to stand trial. The courtroom was full. Survivors sat in the back. Reporters filled notebooks. She stood tall, pale, hands folded. No apology, no shame. What came next was not a verdict. It was a promise, made in the name of the dead.
Now first, like always, be sure to hit the like button down below. It helps us out tremendously with the reach of this video. Thank you.
Execution on the Hill, Wanda's final day. It was July 4th, 1946, in a place called Biskupia Gorka, a hill near Gdańsk. Wooden gallows stood under a gray sky. 11 people had been sentenced to hang. 6 men, 5 women, all former guards of Stutthof, all found guilty. Wanda Klaff was one of them. The announcement had been made in newspapers days before, and when the morning came, nearly 200,000 people gathered. Some carried newspapers folded under their arms. Some brought children. Workers were given the day off to watch. The condemned were brought in by truck. Their hands were tied, their legs too. Former camp prisoners, wearing their old striped uniforms, waited by the ropes. They would carry out the hangings themselves. Wanda was fourth in line. She didn't scream, she didn't beg. A female executioner placed the rope around her neck. The platform beneath her feet gave way, but the rope was not meant for mercy. It didn't snap the neck. It was strangled. Her body hung for over 10 minutes. The crowd did not turn away. Some clapped, some cried. And when it was over, people climbed the platform. They tore pieces of clothing from the corpses. Buttons, strips of fabric, a piece of history to hold in their hands. Wanda was 24 years old when she died, but her victims never reached that age. Some never reached 10. Her hanging wasn't just punishment. It was something colder, a message, a mirror. And the same fate would soon meet others, not just those who followed orders, but those who gave them. One of them was a man who once led death squads across the East. His name was Arthur Nebe. Arthur Nebe, death behind the desk. Arthur Nebe didn't shout or beat prisoners. He wore clean uniforms, sat behind polished desks, and signed orders that killed thousands. He began as a police officer in Berlin, calm, intelligent, ambitious. He joined the Nazi Party early and rose quickly. By 1936, he was head of Germany's criminal police, a man who used numbers instead of bullets, but whose work fed the same machine. In 1941, he stepped out from behind the desk. He led Einsatzgruppe B, one of the mobile death squads that followed the German army into the Soviet Union. Their task was simple: kill Jews, Roma, communists, Whole villages vanished. Mass graves filled the forests. Nebe reported numbers like 1,000 shots today. Cold, efficient. But bullets, he realized, were messy, so he helped test new methods, carbon monoxide gas from truck engines. It worked, and it would soon evolve into the gas vans, then gas chambers. Later, he joined the plot to kill Hitler. Some said it was guilt, others said it was fear. Either way, the bomb failed. Nebe ran, hide, but he was caught and sentenced to hang. Not for what he tried to stop, but for all he helped begin. Hanging with piano wire, a slower kind of death. Arthur Nebe didn't face a normal hanging. After his failed role in the plot to kill Hitler, he was taken to Plötzensee prison. Their executions were done differently, not with a drop, but with a hook and wire. On March 21, 1945, Nebe was tied by the neck with a thin rope, then hoisted onto a meat hook. No platform, no quick snap, just slow, choking silence. It was the same kind of death he had designed for others, silent, unseen, and cruel. He had once tested gas vans on psychiatric patients, measuring how long it took them to die. He had hanged people in public to frighten towns into obedience. Now, alone in a dark room, he felt what it meant. No nameplate, no grave, just a slow end in the place where death had become routine. And outside, Berlin burned as the empire he served turned to ash. Rudolf Höss, architect of Auschwitz. Rudolf Höss didn't scream. He didn't raise a gun. He didn't get blood on his hands. He just made sure the trains ran on time. As commandant of Auschwitz, he oversaw the murder of more than 1 million people. Jews, Roma, Polish prisoners, children. Death to him was a schedule.
Every day there was a selection, not just at the train ramp when people arrived. That was the biggest selection.
He helped design the gas chambers, ordered the use of Zyklon B. Victims were told to undress, told they'd be showered, then sealed inside rooms where gas fell from the ceiling. Screams faded fast. He timed how long it took, adjusted for efficiency, burned the bodies in ovens that ran day and night. Even the hair of the dead was collected. When he was caught, Höss didn't run. He confessed everything, calm, almost proud. He said he had simply followed orders and done his job well. But Auschwitz was not just a job. It was a machine of horror, and he was the one who kept it running. Rudolf Höss didn't show rage. He showed order, and in that order, millions disappeared. A death where he once killed. In 1947, Rudolf Höss was brought back to Auschwitz, not as a commander, not as a man with power, but as a prisoner awaiting his sentence. The court had made its decision. He would hang, and the place chosen that was not random. His gallows would rise beside the gas chamber, the same one where he had overseen the deaths of over 1 million people. On April 16th, under a cold morning sky, Höss was led to the scaffold. No crowd, just silence. The rope was placed around his neck. He didn't speak, didn't cry, didn't resist. He looked once, not at the sky, but at the camp behind him. Then the trap door opened. There were no cheers, no noise, just the sound of justice, slow and final. His body was cut down, buried without a name, without a stone. But Auschwitz doesn't forget. The bricks, the wire, the shoes, they are louder than any last words. And in the place he built for death, Rudolf Höss became just another memory in its shadow. The final drop, Nuremberg's last gallows. October 16th, 1946, Nuremberg. Inside a gym-turned-execution chamber, the final sentences were carried out. 10 high-ranking Nazi leaders faced the rope. The 11th, Hermann Göring, escaped justice with a hidden cyanide pill the night before. One by one, they were led to the gallows. Among them was Julius Streicher, the man who spread hate with ink and paper. As the rope was placed around his neck, he shouted, "Heil Hitler!" His voice cracked. There was no applause. The executioner, John Clarence Woods, miscalculated the ropes. Some fell too far, others are enough. Instead of quick deaths, several men choked and kicked in silence. Ribbentrop, Keitel, Kaltenbrunner. Their last words were a strange mix of defiance, prayer, and regret. When it was done, the bodies were photographed. Tags reading Nazi hung from their necks. The world was watching. But not everything ended with those drops. Some called it justice. Others called it revenge. The ropes closed their eyes, but not the pain, not history, because the real weight of their crimes still lives in memories, in ashes, and in the silence they left behind. The ropes stopped their breath, but not the story. The gallows ended lives, not legacies. Names like Klaff, Nebe, and Höss may fade, but the pain they caused still lingers, in places, in memories, in silence. Justice came, but questions remain. Can ordinary people do monstrous things and still call themselves human? The war ended, the trials finished, but memory doesn't hang or fall, it stays. And the world changes not when evil dies, but when we choose to remember, to speak, to resist, because the past is not buried. It waits for someone brave enough to look it in the eye.